Okay, let's deep dive into something that flips a really common idea on its head. When we typically think about creating wealth, the picture is pretty traditional, right?
Hmm.
It involves capital, maybe it's money in the bank, investments, an inheritance, venture funding.
Yeah, the age-old wisdom is you need money to make money.
That's the pervasive narrative, isn't it?
It is, and look, it's been true for a long time. Access to capital was often the gatekeeper. It decided who could start a business, who could invest, who could uh, really get ahead.
But the material we're exploring today presents a seriously counterintuitive premise. It asks, what if you actually don't need that initial capital to create wealth in today's world?
Right. And what's fascinating about this perspective is that it argues this isn't just like theoretical, it's becoming a tangible reality, particularly powered by the digital landscape we live in now.
So, our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack how this idea works. We're going to explore how wealth, as this source defines it, can be built today not by starting with a big pile of cash, but by leveraging resources you might already possess.
And this approach suggests the key ingredients replacing traditional capital are things like creativity, specific skills, consistency, and strategically deploying resources like your time, your existing knowledge, your network, and incredibly, the vast array of free tools now at your fingertips.
Yeah, it sets the stage for understanding a fundamental shift happening in how value and prosperity are created right now. Is the old capital requirement still the dominant force, or has something else, taken center stage?
Well, let's dig into the core argument then. This idea that the need for traditional capital as a prerequisite is changing. It really pushes back against that popular narrative that getting richer requires you to already be rich.
Right. The central claim here is quite direct. You don't need to be rich to get richer anymore. This perspective suggests the old, narrow path of needing significant money to even start building wealth isn't the only viable route today.
And this idea becomes even more compelling when you look at how this source defines wealth itself. It moves way beyond just, the monetary balance in your account.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting. It defines wealth as multidimensional. It absolutely includes income, sure, but critically, it also includes freedom.
Freedom of time, freedom of location.
Yeah, alongside influence, time itself as a valuable asset, and personal fulfillment.
That broader definition suddenly opens up entirely different pathways to prosperity. These paths might not demand a huge financial investment up front, but they absolutely require significant effort, strategic thinking, and persistence over time. It's a different kind of investment.
And we see tangible examples of this happening everywhere, right? The source highlights several specific ways people are building these dimensions of wealth with little to no traditional capital.
Think about starting a YouTube channel. What do you really need to begin? Often it's just a smartphone camera, which most people already possess, and an internet connection. The platform itself is free.
Or launching digital products. So this could be ebooks, templates, online courses. Platforms exist now, like Gumroad, that allow you to upload your knowledge or creations and sell them directly to customers.
Yeah, they handle payment processing and delivery, often taking just a small cut.
So you don't need, your own complex website set up initially?
Not really, no. That means you don't need to build an entire e-commerce infrastructure or invest heavily in inventory upfront.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Affiliate marketing is another classic low-capital entry point. Creating blogs or newsletters using free platforms like Substack or Medium allows you to start sharing your expertise or interests. If you build an audience, you can monetize by recommending other people's products and earning a commission. You're leveraging your knowledge and writing skill, not, buying ad space.
And of course, freelancing. Offering skills you already have, writing, graphic design, coding, sales expertise, coaching.
Right, via platforms like Fiverr or even just networking on LinkedIn.
Your primary asset here is your skill and your time, not a significant financial investment.
Exactly. And the crucial thread connecting all these examples is precisely what the source points out. They don't demand capital to start. They demand knowledge you possess or can acquire, the willingness and ability to execute, and the patience to build something gradually.
And underpinning all of this, enabling this shift, is arguably the biggest force multiplier mentioned, the internet itself. This perspective calls it the great equalizer.
It argues that in today's world, access is a more powerful asset than money was traditionally. Consider this.
Yeah.
The internet provides instant access to a global audience for your ideas, your products, your services.
Absolutely. And access to free or low-cost learning platforms to acquire the skills we just discussed. Plus, access to distribution and monetization tools, regardless of where you live. If you have a basic device and connectivity, you have a potential doorway to global markets and knowledge. It's kind of amazing.
And look at the free tools available that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Tools like Canva for a professional-looking design, ChatGPT for generating ideas, or even automating content creation.
Google Sites for a simple web presence, Notion for organizing your entire operation.
You can create, market, and manage sophisticated projects without paying for expensive software licenses initially. It lowers the barrier so much.
Social media platforms themselves allow you to reach potentially vast audiences and build a brand or following without spending a dime on traditional advertising.
Yeah, purely by creating value and connecting with people.
So this section really prompts you, the listener, to think differently. Given this equalization, what opportunities does this reality open up specifically for you?
What knowledge or skills do you have that could be leveraged using these free tools and platforms?
It completely flips that initial question from, what capital do I need to start, to what access, tools, and existing skills do I have that I can use right now?
Which leads directly to what this perspective identifies as being truly needed to start building wealth today. It argues that traditional capital isn't the foundation you need to begin.
It says the starting point is actually belief.
Belief. That sounds almost philosophical, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
But the reason is practical. This source claims that the primary reason most people don't start building something is not a lack of money, but a lack of action. They get stuck waiting to feel completely ready, waiting until they've saved a certain amount, waiting for the perfect idea or the perfect moment.
So the waiting is the actual barrier, not the absence of capital. The belief needed is the belief in your ability to start without all the traditional pieces in place.
Precisely. And this perspective is very clear about what you need to cultivate and leverage instead of capital. It highlights 4 key elements.
Okay, what are they?
First, an action-driven mindset. It's about embracing the idea of starting small, taking imperfect action, and crucially, staying consistent over time.
Right. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough to begin.
Exactly. Second, skills that genuinely solve problems for others. The examples given are writing, designing, coding, or selling. These are skills you can develop through free resources and practice, and they form the basis of value creation.
Okay.
Third, building an audience or network. This isn't about buying followers. It's about creating value, sharing generously, building trust, and growing connections organically with people who resonate with what you offer.
For real connection.
Yeah. And fourth, the practical side. Leveraging those free tools and platforms we discussed, using them intelligently to create your product or service, market it effectively, and handle the logistics of selling.
This list feels like a direct challenge to you, the listener. Which of these 4 things do you already possess, even in a nascent form, and which could you start actively building today, right now, using readily available resources?
It reframes the starting equation entirely, shifting the focus from external financial resources to internal capabilities and accessible external tools.
So pulling together the threads of this perspective, the conclusion it reaches is quite powerful. You are your first asset.
Your unique ideas, your voice, your personal knowledge, the skills you have or can acquire these are presented as your initial, most crucial forms of capital in this new landscape.
Money, in this view, isn't the engine that starts the process. It's presented more as a multiplier. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it. If you introduce capital to something that's already working, already gaining traction based on these other assets, it can absolutely accelerate growth. But it's explicitly not seen as a prerequisite to simply begin building something from scratch.
So the real wealth, the underlying capacity, according to this idea, is in your inherent ability to take action.
To start creating value from seemingly nothing but your own ingenuity and effort, and critically, to persist and adapt, especially when things get challenging.
Okay, so recapping this deep dive then, the central disruptive idea from this source is clear. You don't necessarily need traditional capital to create wealth in the modern digital age. You need something else entirely.
And the perspective leaves us with a very pointed thought, almost a direct address to anyone who's felt held back.
It says, if you've ever told yourself I'd start building wealth if only I had the money, it's time for a fundamental shift in that thinking.
The implication is that the real barrier isn't sitting in your bank account or lack thereof, but perhaps something internal.
The final line from this source is quite provocative. You don't need capital to create wealth. You need courage to start without it.
Which leaves us with this for you to consider. Is courage, not capital, the resource you actually need to find to take that first step today.